Our next guest is Richard Nero, and he's going to be doing a comprehensive guide on Excel lookups. So Richard fell in love with Excel at 8 years old by watching his mum create graphs for a math lesson. Now, 33 years later, Richard runs a Microsoft tech consultancy firm specializing in automation and reporting across the Microsoft tech stack and beyond. He is also a proud Excel MVP.
So you've already done my intro. Brilliant. I'm Richard Nero, Microsoft MVP, developers consultant, and I'm going to talk to you about lookups. And I've seen a lot of content you guys have shared, and it's probably quite advanced compared to my little lookups. But when I do Excel training, it's surprisingly surprising that a lot of people struggle with these more basic tasks. Okay, so
there we are.
Okay, VLOOKUPs. I'm hoping there's some people that need to know how to do a VLOOKUP, because I know there's a lot of complex stuff on here, but I'm just going to dive into it. So what does a VLOOKUP do? It basically, we know something, we know some limited amount of information about our employee. It could be a product, it could be a building. We know some limited information, but we've got loads of information about that thing on another table, and you have to imagine that this is like 10,000 rows. Okay, so it's not humanly possible to just take this and cast your eye across here. And so what a VLOOKUP does is it takes this one thing we know, it looks up against this table, and then finds a thing that we want to know. And so in this example, we want to know the name, we want to know the department, we want to know the location, and we want to know the manager, but all we know is the employee ID. Okay, so we start all our formulas with an equals VLOOKUP, and now we choose our lookup value, which is our employee ID, and then we scoot over to the next value, slot a comma in, table array. Our table array is what? Our table array is our employee table. Highlight that, put our comma in, and so now we have to give it a column index number. Which column do we want? We want column number 2. So it's not column K, it's not column 1, 2, 3, 4. You look inside the table array and you count how many columns in you want. You want 1, 2, so we just slot a 2 in, and we want an exact match. 9 times out of 10 we want to find our lookup value exactly how it appears here. And we could type in false, we could type it, but I'm a bit lazy, so I'm going to put in a 0. It's binary, 0s and 1s. 1 is true, 0 is false. So I'm just going to put in a 0. And by the power of Excel magic, if the Excel gods are shining down upon me this morning in London, Fiona, is that right? Let's have a look. Yes, it is. Fiona is she works in marketing. So if I drag this across, it should give me marketing. Drag it across. Wasn't it? How is this glitch? I wasn't expecting that to work. Oh, it's still working because it's this stacking thing. All right. What we really want is to use our $signs to fix these columns down, because if you notice, when we drag these across, I changed these learning resources this morning, and it should have errored a lot more. But anyway, I'll keep going. When we drag our formulas across and something goes wrong, the best formula to check is the bottom right hand formula, because if there's been any issues, it's going to be in the bottom right hand formula. So we click, it's going to be exaggerated in the bottom right hand formula. So if you go to the bottom right hand formula, have a look, see what's happened. Oh no, it's gone wonky. Our table array has shifted to the right and it's shuffled down. Not what we wanted. Okay, so we need to address this, and we need to use these little mini padlocks, aka $signs, and this introduces the concept of the absolute versus relative referencing. So what we, at the moment, when we drag this across, these ranges are going to move, and so we use these little padlocks, but they're not actually padlocks. They're dollar signs. So if we could just type the dollar signs in with Shift 4, but we're lazy. So we're going to use F4 shortcut. So we click into the C7, hit F4, hit F4 again, hit F4 again, and boom, we have our column locked because it's on the left-hand side of our column reference. Okay, brilliant. But then we also need this to stay. All right, and if we highlight this whole thing, we can do one F4. But if we hadn't highlighted the whole thing, we'd have to do them individually. F4, F4. Press enter, and now when we drag this across, the only thing we do need to change is the column reference, and this is a limitation of VLOOKUP, which we'll talk about in Mojo. Drag that across, make that 4, drag that across, oops, make that 5, and then double click, and that should work. So manager Johnson E5, there we go, brilliant. My spectacles are steaming up. All that excitement for me logging into like 3 different Teams sessions at the start. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is the limitations of VLOOKUPs. So with the limitation of VLOOKUP, that it always assumes that our lookup value is in the leftmost column. So if our employee ID was in the middle somewhere, it wouldn't work, because the table, it looks for your lookup value in the leftmost column. So if our employee ID was over here, it wouldn't work. The other thing worth mentioning is your VLOOKUP will only work reliably if your ID or your lookup value is unique. Okay, and so I'm going to flip over to look at this table, and if we look here, if we're trying to pull out the project budget, okay, you got all these different projects, all these different budgets, and we have the employee number. But if we did a VLOOKUP just off this employee number, so this employee 1 and it's project 5, if we did a VLOOKUP here, it's going to pick up the first one, because it's just going to find that first one and return that project budget, which is incorrect. We want project 5. So how do we get around that limitation? Well, we have to use a 2-tiered look. I don't know if that's the correct technical term, but we have to introduce a composite key. We have to create a metric that is unique, because at the moment, employee isn't unique, project ID isn't unique. But if we combine them, if we create a composite key, what is a key? A key is just a technical database term for a unique field. So over here, our primary key was this. We don't have a primary key in here, so we're going to make one. So we're going to take that, and we're going to use the ampere and sign. And I always like to put a little dash just to not make it a bit more, just to make it a bit more readable. Okay, so now we're cooking. So we now have a unique key. Whenever I teach this, someone's like, how do you know it's unique? Well, we can just do a quick count if on here and prove that this is a unique value. So this count if is counting if it's that, and yes, they're all 1. They're all unique. And so over here, we're now ready to do our VLOOKUP. So if we do a VLOOKUP on, and notice it's the E code, then the P code. So we take the E code first, and then put our dash in with the speech marks, pop that in, and now our table array is this, and our lookup values on the left hand side. We don't have to worry about dollar signs, because I don't know, we do have to worry about dollar signs, sorry. Slot those in, and notice when you put your F4 in straight away, one F4 will slot in $4 signs. If you don't, you have to go back and do 2 F4s. So let me quickly just show you that again. So if I now press comma and then go, oh, damn it, I forgot to put my F4s in. Oh, look, you have to do them twice. So you save a click if you do it straight away. So just remember to do it straight away. And our project budget is in column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whack 7 in. We want an exact match. Close brackets. Press enter. Double click trick. Boom. And so let's check the bottom. If you're doing a formula, always check the last one, because that's, if there's going to be an issue, it's going to be the last one. We're saying project 3, employee 5. Project 3, employee 5 is there. It's 50,000. Woo! We did it. Amazing. Incredible. I want to now show you the same thing, but with one of my favorite sets of formulas in the world, index and match. Because one of the problems with VLOOKUP is that you got to put in these column index numbers, all right? And you notice I had to change that 3. But what happens if Liam Bassett comes along and says everybody needs to get a bonus, and he's coming here and he's saying bonus, everybody's getting a bonus of £10,000 except for Lisa, who was browsing inappropriate content, so she gets 0. Oh, look over here, look, the part, this is broken. Okay, manager New York, Chicago, that's not right. So it's not very fault tolerant. You've just seen Liam's put a bonus in and everything's broken. So I'm going to go index and match. One of my favorite formulas of all time, or formula combinations. Okay, let's zoom in a little bit. So index and match, what do they do? So index, oops, I put plus. I'm not one of those people. Index, we give it an array where's the thing that we want to find. The thing that we want to find is in this in this column, in this range. And we always got to think proactively. What's going to happen to this formula? We're going to drag this formula across. So when we drag this formula across, we don't want the columns to move. So we put in F4. Notice that everything, all 4 went in straight away because I put it in straight away. F4 again. That's going to lock the rows. We want to lock the rows and let the columns move freely so that this moves to department. Okay. We then need to say what row employee ID 1 is on. Okay, so row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Row 6. Boom. But that's hard coded. We don't hard code formulas here. Okay, so we need to use the match formula to tell us which row it's on. So we look up the employee ID here. We don't want the employee ID to move columns when we drag this across, but we do want it to move the rows. So we get our little padlock, aka the $, and whack it on the column reference, comma, our lookup array. Where is our employee ID? Our employee IDs live over here. And when we drag this formula to the right and we drag this formula down, we don't want the employee IDs to move around. F4 straight away. $4 in one swift key press. Comma, and we want an exact match. Close brackets, press enter. Are the Excel gods looking down on me favorably? Let's press enter. Fiona, yes, that's right. Dragged it to the right. Oh, yeah. One thing I like about index and match is when you push the match outside of the formula. Okay, so let me just put my match out here for a sec. So if I use my match as a helper column, it serves as a nice little visual as to which row it's on. And there's some debate about which is right and which is wrong. But I always like to reference my match to a little helper column so that I can see which row it's on. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Oops. Copy paste formulas. Didn't go all the way down. Okay. So it's just a nice little, when you're doing your audit in your formulas, you can just glance over here and you can get some comfort that you know it's on row 10, which it is. Okay, now we're going to do the project budget, which we all know how to do because we have to create a composite key. Composite key, which I already explained, is just creating a key from two different fields. So we're just going to add these two together. Copy those down. And I'm going to put my match in this formula just for speed. So where is the thing that we want to return? Where's our array that we want to return? We want to return our project budget. There it is. Lock it down with F4. Pow. Put the comma in. We're going to do our match on, well, we need to create the employee dash project ID. So we go, whoops. Has it crashed again? Nope, I'm back. Take the employee and, oh, 2 dashes, only wanted one. Take the employee, add the project. Where does that live? Where are we going to find that? Where's that lookup array? It's over here. Let's lock it down with F4. One swift press of F4, and we get $4 signs. Copy that down. Done. And it's when I teach this in person, gosh, people really struggle with this. Like, it's for people picking this up for the first time, it's pretty abstract. Okay, and the final one, XLOOKUP. XLOOKUP, here we go. XLOOKUP, a fairly newish formula. It's supposed to replace VLOOKUP. I haven't really embraced XLOOKUP as much as a lot of other people have. The reason being is that a lot of the world still don't have XLOOKUP. So I think Mike Gervin said, he gave me a fact that it's like, he reckons like 85% of Excel users don't have Microsoft 365. That was, I don't know how he came to that number, but if you send your spreadsheet and it's full of XLOOKUPs, if you send that spreadsheet to someone and they don't have the, I think it's Excel 2019 XLOOKUP came in, if they have anything less than that, it's going to break, right? So just bear that in mind. If your spreadsheet is completely internal and everyone's got 365, go for it. So XLOOKUP, very similar to the VLOOKUP, but instead of looking up a table, we just look up the array and we return an array. Okay, so our lookup value is the employee ID. Boom. Press our F4 in. Oh, there we go. So our lookup array, it's a column. It's no longer a table array. It's a column. So we just reference this column here. We don't want that to move. F4 it down, comma, return array is the name. We want to lock the rows, but not the columns. So we F4, that's locking everything. F4 again, locking the rows. That's what we want. You could just stop here, okay? But there's some inbuilt error handling. Let's say that if it's not found, it will put in TBC, okay? I highly recommend handling your errors gracefully. Match mode, we're going to do an exact match, close brackets, Control D to copy them down, Control R to copy them right. And it's worked, I think. Let's check. Employee 5, Manager Johnson. Incredible. Absolutely great. Lastly, I'll quickly do the project budget. I'm sure I've done the reps now on this, so you probably get this already, but I'll quickly smash it out. Project ID with the employee ID. We build that reference or build that key over here. So the lookup value is employee ID. Our lookup array is this column over here. We don't want it to move, so you hit the F4. Our return array is the project budget. We don't want it to move. If there's no, if it doesn't find it, we'll do TBC. And then let's test what happens when Liam Bastick, the nicest boss of all time, gives everyone a bonus. Oh, it still works. Look, nothing's broken. Everyone gets 10K. Even Lisa, she's promised not to browse any more inappropriate content, and everything still works. Conscious that was way quicker than 45 minutes. But normally when I do this, there's lots of questions and people just don't get it. So I'm hoping you guys have some filler content for me to fill the gap, because that was a lot faster than I had anticipated.
Hi, Richard. That's all good. We've actually got a couple of questions as well that we prepared.
Questions? Oh, I'm so excited. Yeah. I didn't think there'd be any questions. Go for it.
No, we've got a couple of questions. No, that's all good. We've got some other questions anyway. So the first question is, what's your preference out of the different lookup functions and why?
Controversially, I'm an index match guy, because when I've worked on massive spreadsheets that you've got lookups across 10,000 rows, if I want to go in and glance at the row that Lisa is on, I will have to then go into this data set. I'll then have to do an auto filter, and then I'll have to but if I have my beautiful and reliable and just lovely index match, I know it's on row 10. So I can just go into that data set and go Control G and just go give me row 10 or whatever row it is, because obviously it might not be row 10 because you've got some filler columns at the top. But yeah, I'm an index match guy, to be honest. But yeah, when I did some testing on this a while ago in terms of efficiency, I created a workbook with 1 million VLOOKUPs, 1 million index matches, 1 million XLOOKUP, and then timed it, and I ran it on I had some VBA things that was running it again and again and again and again, refreshing it to see what was actually fastest. And to my disappointment, VLOOKUP came up fastest. But speaking to Jan Carroll and Charles Williams, they said, Richard, your approach was not following best practice. So I need to redo that with Fast Excel. So Charles Williams has that tool, Fast Excel, which I think measures the efficiency of formulas. So I need to maybe redo that. But that's a long, convoluted way of saying I prefer index match.
What do you think will come out on top when you test it with the Fast Excel?
Just logically, you'd think XLOOKUP, right? Just because it's a newer formula that you'd hope was more efficient. But I'm never going to let go of index match. But if it's a big spreadsheet that I know I'm going to live in for a long time, then I'll use index match. If it's something that I'm just going to pass on to somebody else who's not very good at Excel, I'll do them a VLOOKUP because that's what they expect. But if I know that it's someone who's actually likes Excel a little bit, they know XLOOKUP, I'll put an X. So while I prefer index match, I have to think about because I'm a consultant, so I deliver stuff. I have to think about business continuity and who's going to be owning this in the future. So as always, it depends.
Awesome. And so what do you see as the biggest issues or mistakes that people usually make or run into when they're using lookup functions?
I guess there's two things. One, they don't it's three things really. F4s. People will do stuff like this. So they'll do their index. Okay, yeah, this is our index. Sorry. Oops. Let me start again. We want to pull out this. Then they do a comma, and they go, "Oh, I forgot to put my F4s in." So they go back, and then they press F4 once, and then they go, "Okay, now the row number." And then obviously when they drag this down, this is going to go skew if. So dollar signs, a lack of understanding of how absolute and relative references work. The second thing is people will try to do VLOOKUPs, XLOOKUPs, etc. on data sets that don't have a primary key or don't have a unique thing, so that their lookup value might appear once or twice. And so you need to normalize your data set. What does that mean? Just make sure that your data set does have a primary key, and you can just do that. You can do that on some data sets, as long as, like, if there was a value here, you would just need to like aggregate it up. But as long as you've got something to aggregate on, you can just aggregate it. And then the other thing is when people have data sets. So if here we're manually, we're just basing this off a range, right? And then tomorrow we get a new employee, and then we get a new project, etc. We get a new amount, and obviously this formula is still picking up or not picking up the full data range. So in the real world, I'd be using tables. But when I first introduce these formulas, trying to explain absolute references and stuff, it gets quite complicated with and not very pretty with structured references. So I always introduce it this way first.
Yeah, so this is how you'd suggest to go about it if you were like newer to Excel, less experienced.
Yeah, but yeah, I should really, right now I'm thinking about it, tables is generally the way to go.
Yeah, so you'd usually if you're dealing with large amounts of data, you'd usually just use tables and then use it through that.
But I always like people to know and love R1C1, not R1C1, A1 notation, and just get a grasp of it and get the dollar signs down. I wish structured references had some sort of dollar sign. It's just not very elegant the way structured references work.
Yeah. And the last question we've got, what are the performance implications of using large lookup ranges? Like if you've got like huge amounts of data, do you hit a point at which using the lookup function starts to become an issue and you need to find ways around that?
If your spreadsheet recalculates in a second, it's fine. If your spreadsheet takes 5 or 10 seconds to recalculate, you probably need to think about using Power Query and doing all those lookups and transformations in Power Query and dropping out your tables or dropping that information into a pivot table. Because yeah, if I've got a big data set, I would not be VLOOKUPing across 100,000 rows. You just, ideally, I wouldn't even do it in Power Query. I'd do it in SQL and then just bring it in. But to answer the question, I forgot any of the question. What was the question?
If there are performance implications of using large lookup ranges, and then how you can better optimize them for.
There's a few ways. Get your data into a database. Use Power Query. The old school way is, I've seen this a lot, is when, say you had all these formulas across 100,000 rows. What you would do is you just copy this row up here. I know it's going to error, but then you hard code these, and so now everything's hard coded. But actually, when you want to refresh it, you just go and get this formula from up here and then refresh it, so that you still have the formula, but everything's hard coded, so it's a bit quicker. I've seen that when I've worked at FTSE 100s, and that is how they got that. That is how they got around their
what at a like large blue chip company. That's how they dealt with it.
That's what they were doing. FTSE, one of the biggest retailers in the UK, and that's how they were managing all the. Oh, it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure a lot of people will find it very useful.
Yeah, and next time I'm going to do something more complicated, because seeing all the other stuff that people are doing, I was like, this is probably a bit basic, but hopefully somebody out there learn to do an index match.
To be honest, I think there's a lot more people who need to see that kind of information that need to see like a lot of the other information that's being shared, right?
Yeah. Gotta get the basics right, get the foundations, and then build up from there.
Thank you very much, Richard.